So what's going on, guys? DIY Dan here, and this is another mechanical video. In this video, I had one of the headlights go out on my 2017 Chevy Silverado HD with a Duramax diesel engine in it. So being as though I had one headlight go out, I decided to replace both of them, and I ended up going with LED because I wanted to get a little brighter on the road, and since I was there, I decided to do the high and low beams. Now, if you have a gas engine instead of the diesel, it's going to be a little easier than what I go through in this video, because the diesel engine carries two batteries under the hood instead of just one, and that makes it a little bit more complicated. But no matter what engine you have, either the gas or the diesel, and you're between the years of 2015 and 2019 with either a 2500 or a 3500 Chevy, and it doesn't matter whether you're replacing the bulbs with halogens or upgrading to the LEDs like I did. This video should help you out. I'm also going to go over another very common failure that happens with the vehicles that I mentioned, which is the pigtail going to those headlights can burn up, cause a loose connection, possibly blow a fuse, or cause premature bulb failure. I'm going to give you the part number for those headlight pigtails and do an overview of how you would replace those if necessary. So let's get to it. The main headlight part number is an H11, so if you search that on online or Amazon, it will come right up. The actual high beam headlight is an HB3. I ended up getting my headlights off of Amazon, and this is the kit that I ordered. It came with the high beam and the low beam bulbs. So far, I have no complaints about this product, and they've been in my truck for about 4 months now without a problem. So I'm going to start with replacing the high and low beam headlights on the passenger side because it is a little bit more complicated. I did have to remove the air filter box in order to get to the headlights to replace them. So right here, I'm just disconnecting the mass airflow sensor so I can remove that air box and get it out of the way. There's a little red tab that you will need to pull back. Once you have pulled back the red plastic tab, then there's a little push button tab that you will need to depress in order to remove the connector from the mass airflow sensor. Then I loosened up the hose clamp that attached the air filter box to the intake tubing. Pulled the intake boot off of the air filter box and then got my hands underneath it and carefully lifted the air box up and out of the engine compartment. The only thing that holds the air filter box to the bracket underneath it is some plastic tabs that have a little bit of a detent on them, and it will take a little bit of force in order to lift those tabs out of the bracket in order to remove it. Anytime you have that intake boot off of the air filter housing, it's a good idea to look inside that boot and make sure there is no dirt or debris. If there is, that's a sign that your air filter is bypassing unwanted material into your engine, which could be a very bad thing. Once removing the air filter box, there is one more little cover you will need to get out of the way in order to access the headlights. This little cover is held on by some plastic body clips, and these can be a little stubborn in order to remove. I actually fought these a lot more than I thought I would. The first body clip removing tool that I tried using didn't work, and I had to go get my other one that's more like a spreader pair of pliers in order to leverage those loose. If you don't have any body clip remover tools, you can also use a pair of dikes, not to cut the clip, but get underneath it and then use a flathead screwdriver or a pry bar to leverage the pair of dikes away in order to pop those clips loose. Once getting the cover out of the way, then there is going to be a plastic waterproof cover over the headlight that you will need to turn counterclockwise just a little bit in order to pop that loose. Once you've got that cover out of the way, you will also need to turn the headlight counterclockwise a little bit more than you did the cover in order to pop it loose and remove it from the headlight housing. So my truck actually had two different pigtails on the headlights. The passenger side had this style, where the tabs that I'm pointing to in this clip go over these tabs on the headlight in order to lock it in place. The crappy part about this is, in order to remove this pigtail, you have to pull on the tabs and open them up simultaneously in order to get it to pop off of that headlight. So in all honesty, lifting both of those tabs simultaneously is kind of a pain in the ass. So I've found that the best way to remove these headlight pigtails is to get a flathead screwdriver, lift one of the tabs, and hold pressure against that tab once you lift it with your thumb. Then go to the other side and use that screwdriver to pry the other tab up while keeping pressure on your thumb. Then as you pry the other side over the clip, the pressure that you keep on the other side should help push the entire pigtail off of the headlight. Sometimes if you get lucky enough, like I did in this one, you can get that first tab to sit up on top of the locking tab of the headlight, so you don't have to hold that constant pressure on it, which frees up both of your hands in order to leverage up the other side to completely remove that pigtail. But that's not always going to happen. Once removing the old headlight, you do want to take a look at the pigtail going to that headlight and make sure that it doesn't show any signs of it melting or getting hot. I'm actually going to show you a better picture of this and what to look for on my driver's side headlight, because it was showing the signs of that a little bit more than the passenger side. Before trying to install your new headlight bulb, you want to put them side by side with the old one and make sure everything looks identical. Now, being as though this is an LED, the actual bulb itself has a little different look to it, but you'll notice that the little locking tabs on the headlight are in the same location. You also want to size up these tabs that are on the headlights to make sure they are the same as well, because that will determine whether it will fit in the headlight housing. The spade terminals inside the connector look to be the same size, however, the new bulb did not have this extra tab. LED bulbs usually have a built-in diode, so if you hook it up incorrectly, they will not work. That tab inside that pigtail, make sure you're not going the wrong direction with that headlight bulb. So what I ended up doing is putting my old bulb back temporarily, grabbed my new bulb, set it right next to the old one, then went ahead and hooked it up so I knew I was going the right direction with that pigtail. When snapping in the pigtail, make sure you hear the little detent of the harness pigtail snapping over those locking tabs on the headlight. You'll also notice that I'm wearing gloves during this process. The oils on your hands can drastically reduce the life of your headlight bulbs, so make sure you wear those. The new LED kit that I got did come with gloves inside the kit. Now you'll notice that I'm struggling to get this headlight bulb back in the actual headlight. At first I thought it was because it was an aftermarket bulb and it just wasn't lining up correctly. Under further investigation, I realized I was being an idiot. And you'll notice that the rubber seal for the old headlight is still inside the headlight housing right there. So there's no way I was going to get that bulb in there with that extra seal. It took me a lot longer than what it should have to figure this out. I even snapped the old bulb back in to make sure that it was going back in correctly. Once that rubber seal was out of the way, I was able to put that new headlight in around 9 o'clock and rotate it up to 12 o'clock into the fully locked position. When reinstalling the waterproof cover, there is a big side and a small side to these covers. Make sure you put the big side towards the top. Here's a little better view of that cover so you can see the difference. These covers also have an O-ring that seals them to the headlight housing, so make sure that didn't fall off or stick to the headlight housing before reassembling it. When locking these into place, I start at 10 o'clock even though it's probably closer to 11. As I put pressure and turn it clockwise, you'll feel the locks kind of push in, and then it should lock into place at that 12 o'clock. This next clip of me doing the high beam is going to sound a little different because I'm explaining it while I'm actually doing it on the vehicle. And you can't really see, but same concept. I'm at 6, turn into 530, pulling that up and out. We're at 6 o'clock, turning that to 5, pulling that out. Lifting up on the tab for the electrical. Make sure you check your connections, make sure they're not burnt. This one you can't time wrong because it's going off of that tab, so that tells you the direction it needs to be. Snap that in position, make sure the detent's good. Go to 5, lock it down to 6. Go ahead and reinstall the waterproof cover. This one starts at 530, locks to 6. Once you've got both headlights in position, I do recommend going in your truck and making sure they work before going through the process of putting this thing back together. Right here, I'm just putting the 2 plastic clips that were holding that plastic cover or flap in place. If you are having trouble getting those pushed all the way in by hand, you can grab a small hammer to assist in tapping them down flush. Then go ahead and install your airbox. Line up those tabs on the bottom of the airbox with the holes in the bracket that's underneath it. When setting the air filter box in place, you should be able to feel and hear the tabs on the bottom of the filter housing locking into the rubber bushings in the bracket below the box. I didn't even realize that a piece of my rubber glove had popped off on that screw and went down in the air filter housing until editing this video. I'll get that out the next time I do an air filter. Once the air filter box is set into place and locked in correctly, then go ahead and slide your intake boot over that air filter housing. When putting the boot over the air filter housing, there is a little tab on the boot that will line up with the air filter housing, and then make sure that the boot is pushed fully up against the raised tabs on the air filter housing to make sure it is on properly. And tighten down the hose clamp. I do like to get those pretty snug because that is your first and last defense against dusting an engine. Not putting an air filter in properly or not tightening down a boot correctly is the easiest way to ruin an engine. So double check yourself when tightening those down. Once I'm done tightening down any hose clamp or anything on the intake side, I tend to grab it, give it a little shake, and make sure everything feels nice and tight, just to double check myself. Plug in the sensor. Once you hear the detent, pop in the red lock, and we're good to go. And that's all there is to replacing the passenger side. Now we're going to jump over to the driver's side. When going over the driver's side, I do have some repeated information that was on the passenger side, but I also have some information that I did not cover on the passenger side as well. If need be, you can remove the driver's side battery in order to make it easier to get to the headlights. I just decided not to do this. In order to access the headlight itself, there is a sealed cover that you need to turn counterclockwise in order to remove that cover. Once you get that cover off, you will be able to access the headlight itself, and you will need to turn it counterclockwise in order to remove it as well. You can see how cloudy this bulb is because it is burned out. In order to unplug the pigtail from the headlight, there is a plastic tab that you will need to depress while pulling on the headlight in order to remove it. These can get brittle, snap over time, and they can also be a pain in the ass, so you do need to be careful. The pigtails on my truck are still the factory original, so you would depress this tab while pulling on the headlight in order to remove it. If they've already been replaced, you might just have to try and lift up on these tabs, or possibly get a screwdriver and pry up on that a little bit while pulling on the headlight in order to remove them. Basically, you need to lift whatever plastic tab is holding on that raised area of the headlamp in order to be able to pull that pigtail off. Once you've removed the old headlight, you want to take a really good look at that pigtail socket. Make sure it does not look melted down in any way, shape, or form. If so, you need to replace that pigtail socket. My sockets were still okay, but you'll notice the brown haze that was starting to form on that plastic. That was a sign that they were starting to get hot. If these had shown any worse signs than what they were, I probably would have went ahead and did them. I also probably would have done them if I had the pigtails on hand, but I had to order them and I had to get my truck back on the road. What happens with these pigtails is the plastic starts getting hot and melts away from the connector. When that happens, then you don't have a tight connection between the headlight and the connector in the pigtail, which creates resistance, which creates more heat, and that can lead to premature bulb failure or possibly a blown headlamp fuse. If you do end up having to replace these pigtails, you're just going to butt connect them back together, red on red, black on black. One of the criticals to making a connection that's going to last a long time without any issues is using a good pair of crimpers. And then I like to use uninsulated butt connectors and put heat shrink over the top of them. The weakest part of a butt connection is where the wires are crimped. And by adding the heat shrink over the top of it along the wire, it's basically gluing that heat shrink to the wire on each side of the connection. By doing that, you're giving it a lot stronger connection that's going to withstand vibration a lot better and is also giving you a watertight seal. So right here, I'm just installing the new headlight. There was no need to verify against the old one because this one used the top tab to make sure it was timed correctly. So I plugged that in, put the bulb in place, turned it from 5:30 to 6 o'clock to lock it in place. Now, because I did not want to pull the battery out to give me more room, I went ahead and left the waterproof cover off of the regular headlight for now. So it made it a little bit easier to get to the high beam, which is underneath that headlight. Once again, pulling that waterproof cover by turning it counterclockwise in order to unlock it to that 530 position and pulling that out. Sorry I didn't get a little better footage of this, but my camera fell over during this process and I didn't really realize it. So right here I'm actually pulling the headlight out by disconnecting that pigtail, reinstalling that headlight, and then putting that headlight back into position by going from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock to lock it in position. Went ahead and put that waterproof cover back in place on the high beam headlight by going from 5:30 to 6 o'clock with that housing. Then went ahead and put the upper waterproof cover on the regular headlight by doing the same. So here's a visual on how those new headlights look. They are a lot brighter than the original halogens. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and it gave you some good information. If so, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I'd really appreciate it. The whole concept of my channel is to give you guys the most information in the least amount of time as possible so I don't waste your time. And I hope to see you next time. Have a good one. Later.